So brilliant. So from one head of digital inclusion before the break to another one, I'm head of digital inclusion for UK tech and disability charity AbilityNet, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the power of technology to transform people's lives. I really cannot underestimate or overemphasize just how powerful tech is and has been for several decades now. So let's rewind the clock with the first slide. So I'm going to ask Andy to control my slides. I'm actually blind myself and just wanted to take that little extra bit of effort away from me so that I can concentrate on what I'm talking about. So here's a picture of a very standard setup of a PC. We've got the keyboard, monitor and mouse, etc., and that great big tower, which probably looks really dated by now. But back in the 80s, with the advent of the PC, everything changed. In the UK now, 90% of jobs use a computer of some shape or form. And as we heard before today, many of those will have a disability. And many of them, you guys at HR and IT, will have a disability that you don't know about as well. So there's huge amounts of potential for adaptation, for changing settings, as we heard before with Hector, on a PC or on a phone, for example. And there are many, many different alternative keyboards, mice. If you can't see the screen, you can use speech output like I do. If you can't use a keyboard or a mouse, then you can talk to the computer, etc., etc. I could quite literally spend a whole day talking to you guys about how you can adapt technology to make sure that you take everyone with you and everyone is able to kind of perform at their best. If we go to the next slide. Now, if you fast forward a couple of decades or so, then we have the advent of the mobile phone, and the smartphone changed everything once again, because now you've got all the smarts of a PC with you wherever you go. Not only that, you've got other sensors like camera, accelerometer, GPS, compass, etc. And all of those sensors work hard for you and provide extra functionality. And if some of your own senses don't work, like my eyes, then something like the camera is hugely empowering. In fact, I use all of those extra sensors that I have mentioned a moment ago, and we'll look at why in a moment with a quick video demo. But with the age of the smartphone came the age of inclusion and the need for accessibility and inclusive design by every single one of your users, of your customers, of your employees. And I'm not exaggerating one iota there, every single one. Many of you will probably use your phone one-handed today already. For example, here we've got a lady, she may or may not have a vision impairment. She's squinting at a screen because now we've gone extreme. We're computing on the edge every single day. Whereas with a desktop scenario, particularly in an office, you know, you can get the size of the screen that you like, you can get the setup exactly how you want it. If the sun's on the screen, then you can close the blinds. If it's too dark, you can turn the lights on, etc. There are so many reasons why when you're computing out and about, every single person is temporarily disabled on a daily basis. So this lady needs good color contrast, good default font size and font style that people with a vision impairment need 24/7, but she needs it for this moment because, you know, small, shiny sheet of glass, bright, sunny day, etc. If we go on to the next slide, I mentioned about using your phone one-handed. So here's a chap, got a phone in one hand, a cup of coffee in the other hand, and using your phone one-handed, you are, in very real terms, motor or dexterity impaired, and you have exactly the same requirements. You have minimum size of 44 by 44 pixels on tappable areas. They need to be sufficiently separated so you don't actually accidentally tap the wrong one. There are so many other parallels between people that have Parkinson's or a tremor and for you who are using your phone one-handed or on a bumpy bus or train. And he's also got a cup of coffee in his hand, so maybe he's just been in a coffee queue. This is pre-lockdown, this slide. And he was talking to people because he was a social kind of guy. And he only had 2 minutes left at the end of his coffee break to quickly do something. And for that moment, he needs extreme usability. Your content, your functionality that people are going to be accessing through their phones needs to be extremely usable so that people can do them quickly in a time-constrained situation. And that extreme usability is what someone with a vision impairment, learning difficulty, cognitive impairment, and even dyslexia needs. to be able to do things successfully, regardless of how much time they have. That extreme usability will benefit those people as well. There are so many situations, and I could go on and on. I don't want to belabor the point. If that wasn't coffee and it was alcohol, then, you know, the Uber app, for example, needs to be extremely usable so that people can successfully get home after a good night out, say. So there are so many parallels, and I hope at the end of the day, you won't go away thinking, well, accessibility is for disabled people. Absolutely not. In fact, accessibility is probably a word that we'd like to move away from because it has connotations, it's got history, but it's really all about doing things in an inclusive way. And as we heard many times today, there are so many reasons, both carrots and sticks, for why you should do things in an inclusive way. If we move on. So people love their tech, but disabled people probably love it even more, and for reasons that I mentioned before, because it's so empowering. It doesn't just add choices, it can actually add life options, including getting through education, getting into work, and being able to stay in work. And the technology is absolutely there. As I mentioned, we could spend a whole day talking about how the tech can be adapted. It's like the ultimate toolkit or Swiss Army knife. So don't think that the tech is a barrier. What's going to be a barrier to these people is what they're accessing on that content, on those devices, whether it's a website or an app or a service. That's going to be the stumbling block, if anywhere. So it's so essential that what they're accessing now in this sort of digital first world is going to be done in an inclusive way. If we move on to the next slide. So as a blind person, I mentioned before that, you know, I might use the camera a lot on my smartphone, and that is absolutely the case. I probably use it more than you guys, unless you're big into selfies, for example, but I certainly use it multiple times a day. And I would use it often using an app. Now, this is one from Microsoft called Seeing AI, and let's see what this does for me.
Seeing AI is a Microsoft research project for people with visual impairments. The app narrates the world around you by turning the visual world into an audible experience. Point your phone's camera, select a channel, and hear a description. The app recognizes saved friends.
Jenny near top right, 3 feet away.
Describes the people around you, including their emotions.
28-year-old female wearing glasses looking happy.
It reads text out loud as it comes into view, like on an envelope.
Ken Lawrence, P.O. Box.
Or a room entrance.
Conference 2005.
Or scan and read documents like books and letters. The app will guide you and recognize the text with its formatting.
Top and left edge is not visible. Hold steady. Lease agreement. This agreement.
When paying with cash, the app identifies currency bills.
$20 US.
When looking for something in your pantry or at the store, use the barcode scanner with audio cues to help you find what you want.
Campbell's tomato soup.
When available, hear additional product details.
Heated microwave bowl on high.
And even hear descriptions of images in other apps like Twitter by importing them into Seeing AI.
A close-up of Bill Gates.
Finally, explore our experimental features like scene descriptions to get a glimpse of the future.
I think it's a young girl throwing a frisbee in the park.
Experience the world around you with the Seeing AI app from Microsoft.
Brilliant. Now, guys, it is that cool. It is that good, that sophisticated, that clever. So thank you to Microsoft and other app developers that are putting in the time to make, you know, these devices incredibly empowering for people with disabilities. So these devices are really changing people's lives. So if we go on to the next slide. Last spring, I was at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. Unfortunately, it got shelved this year for obvious reasons, but this is me wearing a pair of smart glasses. These are the Vuzix smart glasses, and they have heads-up displays in the lenses. Obviously, I can't use those, but they also have a camera and built-in sound, etc. And the reason why I'm showing these is because this is like having Seeing AI on your face. If you have smarts in glasses, like a camera and the ability to recognize objects and text, then you don't even have to pick up your phone. and the power and potential for people with disabilities of this next generation of platform, or the proliferation of platforms that we're seeing at the moment, is enormous. Now, Google Glass is having something of a revival at the moment, and there is a similar app to Seeing AI that runs on that Android platform called Envision AI. And only this week we have had premier Apple leaker John Prosser saying that the Apple glasses are coming next year, and obviously Microsoft have HoloLens. So this is a platform that's not going away. You're potentially going to be delivering your content and functionality on these sorts of platforms as well. So what does it look like? Let's take color contrast that we mentioned up earlier for someone who's having to access a small screen on a sunny day. What does color contrast look like when the screens are now see-through? So, having color contrast between text and background is going to be tricky unless you can force the background color. But then obviously if you make the whole of the heads-up display a block of color so that the text is nicely high contrast, then people are going to walk into things, and believe me, they will be looking at stuff like that while they're walking along. We all know that that is a thing with phones. So you need to think about these things in how cleverly you embrace inclusive design. And it's to the point now where people that don't consider accessibility in this extreme age of computing and the proliferation of platforms are really not going to be providing products or services that are fit for purpose. And your competitors will be on that journey as well. They may be further along the curve than you. So I would almost argue that it's table stakes today to make sure things are inclusive. Then they will be more easily able to be used by people on these different platforms, and more easily ported to different platforms as well. If you go on to the next slide, this is a shameless plug for a daily podcast that I'm involved in called Dot to Dot. It's all about the Echo. It's daily, and we're up to episode 1209 without missing a day. And that indicates just how much there is to say about these smart speakers, which I would argue is the next generation. We've had desktops with great big screens full of information. Then we went to mobile phones, which imposed much more discipline on editors and developers to distill down information to the essence of what you're trying to get across, which obviously made it much easier for people with disabilities to access as well, a much simpler UI. And now we're going right down to something which in many cases doesn't have a UI at all. You just talk to the air and it talks back to you. You really need to be thinking about having a presence on these smart speakers. How can people access information about your business at the moment? Is it just if you've got a Wikipedia page, for example, or are you going to have a skill on there, which means that they'll be able to find out about your organization, maybe vacancies, maybe the application process, maybe you even want to have an FAQ for people that are thinking about, applying for jobs with your organization. For employees, maybe you want to have some functionality on there for them to use, and this can be made secure. You can put a pin on it. You can have voice print technologies on all of these smart speakers, so it will only respond to you with your particular voice. So you could even be accessing the employee handbook, for example, or different policies. And in an ideal world, people could actually sign off on different things or book leave, etc., through these platforms. And guess what? There are guidelines for smart speakers about how to do things in an inclusive way as well. If we move on to the next slide. What's this? Well, back to Mobile World Congress, and there was a stand where there was an air taxi. I'm not sure if you can see in the picture there in the background, they had a video screen showing it in action in Qatar, taking people on trips. And autonomous vehicles are definitely going to be a thing. They're just around the corner, excuse the pun. And we've actually had quite a lot of food delivery being made by autonomous vehicles in the UK and the US, and I'm sure elsewhere as well during lockdown. And that's hugely empowering for people with disabilities. Maybe for the first time in my life, I will be able to go from A to B, wherever I want to go, under my own steam, in a nice, relaxing environment. And the reason why I've got an air taxi here is because, driverless vehicles, they're really passé now. So obviously air taxis, we've already moved on. So that's why I've got this one here. But also because people, when they're traveling to work, whether it's on public transport, in a driverless vehicle or an Uber, or even in a flying taxi, are going to be accessing content. potentially your content. They're going to be in bumpy, very noisy environments if it's the air taxi, incredibly noisy and vibrating environments, but they'll still want to access their content. And so you need to think about inclusive design. Environments in which people are going to be accessing your functions and content are only going to get more and more extreme as we go along. Please don't leave anyone behind, particularly not people with disabilities. We go on to the next slide. So this is a video. This is a real bus shelter that we're going to see now in London. I am reliably informed, and I will explain why on earth I have shown you this after we've watched it.
Let me flip this script. I feel privileged for all who can witness this. I am close to the vine, or the moment is mine, the moment of sign. To all the squares that ask around the internet, my skills pay me. Trying to get a million feet, even an adopted flow that God gave me. You know, tell whoever runners every spot is temporary till I think I got that one. Tell me some of my wealth pick. So when we cash out soon, I'm just investing.
I'm telling you, this is how it works, man. There's a little camera right here.
So why on earth did I show you that video? Well, mainly because it was just cool. That's basically it, really. But also because I mentioned earlier about, heads-up displays and how you might have to think about what accessibility looks like when the screens that people are going to be accessing information on are clear. And certainly in the future, I think there's going to be more and more of this sort of thing where potentially every window of every office or shop that you pass by is a screen and is leveraged for ads and campaigns, etc., information. So embrace inclusive design today. Think about what it's going to mean in what you do today, and then you're going to be set for what it means for the future when all of these platforms just become more and more extreme. Technology is just going to get bigger, better, more ubiquitous, and potentially more empowering as well. So yeah, please do jump on board. Obviously, the danger is that we're talking to the choir, to the converted here, but please take those messages home. Accessibility is not just for disabled people. It should be table stakes today. If we go on to the last slide. So Q&A will happen. If you want to join the room that I'm going to be part of, we can have more questions and answers about technology, the end user experience, that sort of thing. But I just want to finish off before I hand over to Joe on a personal note. So I mentioned right at the beginning, the advent of the PC, that coincided with when I was in secondary school and then went to university. I had a talking laptop. It was a DOS laptop with a hardware speech synthesizer. It was the size of a small suitcase, but that got me through. And then Windows came along, and the blind community in particular were absolutely terrified that they would be left behind. But thanks to Microsoft and their ever-present commitment to accessibility, ever since Windows 3.11, I've been using Windows and Office very successfully. I've never been out of work since, thankfully, touch wood, thank you God. So, that I owe everything to that technology. And thankfully, AbilityNet was willing to take me on, and I've been with them ever since. And we've really been helping change people's lives by telling them about this technology. But, if it wasn't for the technology, I would not necessarily have got my education or been employable. And I've moved to Warwick, a really nice part of the world, with AbilityNet. That's where their offices are. And in moving to Warwick, I've met my wife, and now I've got 2 gorgeous children. So I owe everything to the technology. So please help and do your bit to make it a really inclusive world.